Hello everyone, Gizmo here, hope you're having a wonderful day. And today I'll be talking about the original Kingdom Hearts. And for those of you that don't know, Kingdom Hearts is a game developed and produced by Square Enix in collaboration with Disney. And it was released way back in 2002. In this video I'll be discussing why it's still worth playing Kingdom Hearts in 2022. And I'll be giving details on its gameplay, its crossover elements, its world building and the side content that Kingdom Hearts has to offer. And hopefully I'll be able to show you what makes Kingdom Hearts 1 so unique amongst the franchise, since these days I just feel it is completely underrated and underappreciated. So, without further ado, let's get into it. And first I want to talk about the gameplay, since I feel this is probably the weakest part of Kingdom Hearts 1 when compared to the rest of the franchise, just due to its slower and clunky movements. And whilst there are more fun Kingdom Hearts games to play, at least from a gameplay perspective, well, if you like flashy combat and to feel like you can overpower all your enemies with your skills in your arsenal, then sure. But I feel there is a certain charm to this slower, more clunky gameplay in the original Kingdom Hearts 1, in that it actually gets you to take into account your combos, or lack thereof, and come up with a strategy of how you're going to beat your enemy. You can't just run in and spam. You can, however, choose to use normal attacks, magic, and summons, just to best your way through battles. And whilst this is all still present in the other numbered titles, in Kingdom Hearts 1 it just felt like you could interrupt enemies mid-combat with a swing of your Keyblade and use that as a counter-attack, something that seems to be missing from the other games. And sure, overall the gameplay itself does feel clunky and unresponsive at times. However, I like to think that this is just because Sora is inexperienced with fighting and is still getting to grips with his new weapon, the Keyblade, over his older, more experienced counterparts. Well, at least that's my headcanon. Besides, Kingdom Hearts 1 is the only game in the franchise that just incorporates actual platforming in its level design, and it truly embraces the platforming genre so much so that it just feels like it's part of the world and relevant in some level set piece designs. And the most notable for me are the caves in Deep Jungle, which you had to climb up in order to complete the world, and the final Oogie Boogie fight in Halloween Town, as you have to traverse giant Oogie to destroy the blobs of darkness. And not only that, but platforming was used creatively in order to find hidden chests, and most notable are the chests in Hollow Bastion, as one requires you use Blizzard to interact with the environment and freeze the bubble, to then use it as a platform to jump up to a secret area. And there's also a chest up by a ledge hidden next to the Heartless emblem door. And on top of its gameplay, the obvious note of why Kingdom Hearts remains special over every game in the franchise is from a story perspective, in that it is the beginning adventure for the dearly beloved Destiny trio, which is comprised of Sora, Riku, and Kairi, and you get to experience a brief moment of their lives before they venture off into the Disney worlds, back when they were just your average kids. And this is also the only real time you get to spend with Sora, Riku, and Kairi, where they actually get to directly interact with one another at the same time in the franchise. And that's crazy to think about, considering that this franchise is in the middle of celebrating its 20th anniversary right now. And I think it's worth noting that Kingdom Hearts 1 captures the magic of both Disney and Final Fantasy in the best way possible. Even though the Final Fantasy characters were only present for cameos, I do appreciate how much focus Kingdom Hearts 1 gave to them, to the point where they actually felt present throughout the lore. And most notably were the Hollow Bastion committee, comprised of Aerith, Squall, Yuffie, and Sid. And having ties to Ansem and having lost their world to Maleficent, it actually gave these characters a stake in the story, despite them being very separate counterparts to their Final Fantasy selves. And even characters that weren't used a lot in Kingdom Hearts, like Selphie, Tidus, and Wakka, still felt like they were relevant, even if it was just as simple as them being from Destiny Islands and just being additional friends to Sora, Riku, and Kairi. Over the years, Final Fantasy has slowly been filtered out of Kingdom Hearts, well, besides our trusty Moogle friend, to the point it just feels non-existent to the story. Although that is the case, it's still a massive part of the history of Kingdom Hearts, and definitely worth checking out Kingdom Hearts 1 for, just because although they are still present in other games like Kingdom Hearts 2, Birth by Sleep, and recently the Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind DLC, just due to the fan backlash, they definitely feel more like they are just there for cameo's sake in the other games, as they don't really have any ties with the overall story like they did in Kingdom Hearts 1. And I get that Final Fantasy characters are such a hot topic in Kingdom Hearts communities as of late, but to those fans I say, you just can't deny that there is something magical and cool about each of those initial interactions between Final Fantasy and Disney back in Kingdom Hearts 1. And as sad as it is for me to say this, I don't think we will ever see Final Fantasy and Disney interact in such a way ever again.
I am the Lord of the Dead! No wonder no one wants to die.
Well, post Kingdom Hearts 2.
We may never meet again, but we'll never forget each other.
No matter where we are, our hearts will bring us together again.
And since we're talking story elements, I feel it's worth mentioning the world building, or in this case, the universe building. Since to me, Kingdom Hearts 1 definitely feels like the most superior game in the franchise in this front, since not only did it have the seemingly impossible task of merging new original characters with Final Fantasy characters and Disney characters and worlds, but it even went a step further into incorporating the Disney villains into the mix, giving them plot relevance over the entire game, as not only did they have a connection to the main protagonist, Sora, as Maleficent is able to manipulate his best friend Riku by tempering the darkness in his heart, but they all play a role in acquiring the 7 Princesses of Heart as well. And the overarching Disney villain presence is something that really only happens within Kingdom Hearts 1, and it just manages to connect all the worlds together in the same story. And as the series went on, the Disney worlds, although still present, just began to feel more and more like their own separate stories, with very little to no plot relevance at all to the main game. But despite the lack of story, I do think it's fair to say that the themes explored in the worlds were still relevant. Now I get there are more than a couple of Kingdom Hearts games that either retell or rehash the plot of the original Kingdom Hearts, but does that mean that Kingdom Hearts 1 should be skipped over entirely? Some fans seem to think so, but I don't think it should. At this point we know the gameplay is slower and more clunky when compared to the later installments in the franchise, but it still holds up to this day, and honestly there's no other game that truly captures the heart and soul of the original Kingdom Hearts. And yes, I'm looking at you, Chain of Memories and Recoded. Besides, by skipping over Kingdom Hearts 1, you just skip such iconic lines such as he hoo ha, not Clayton.
There can't be 2 Keyblade Masters.
You're stupid! Kyrie's inside me? There's no way you're taking Kyrie's heart!
And the Riku fight in Hollow Bastion, which is still my favourite boss fight in the entire franchise. And it's also the only game where you actually get to hear Sora's mum's voice.
Sora! Dinner's ready! Come on down! Sora?
And with regard to the side content, I just love how Kingdom Hearts encourages exploration by incorporating side activities and minigames to accomplish whilst traversing the main story. For example, the search for the 99 Dalmatian puppies, since this just allows you to go to the worlds in search of the chests that hold the Dalmatian puppies inside, and upon completion, Pongo and Perdita share their thanks and offer you items and magic in some cases. And although optional, it just added this extra bit of lore and substance to the original Kingdom Hearts and spoke volume to the character of Sora, in that he just does whatever he has to do to restore the light to the worlds and their inhabitants. And I really like this addition to the original Kingdom Hearts and just hope that it does return in the future installments, since it just gives you something to do with your exploration outside of the 100% completion, whilst also giving additional opportunities for characters within other Disney IPs to pop up without them ever needing to have a world or main story plot relevance. And another thing that the original Kingdom Hearts has at its disposal is the Colosseum. And although it did appear in Kingdom Hearts 2, it just felt more like a needless minigame when compared to Kingdom Hearts 1. And I just feel that the Kingdom Hearts 1 Colosseum felt more like the game trying to provide you a gameplay challenge and an opportunity to fight additional bosses that you wouldn't have had the chance to otherwise, like Yuffie, Ice Titan, Rock Titan, Hades and Sephiroth just being exclusive to the Colosseum itself. And even while struggling all this, Kingdom Hearts 1 still managed to incorporate Easter eggs within the actual level design of the worlds as well. For example, the Lady in Tramp fountain found in Traverse Town, and the tea set from Beauty and the Beast, just to name a few. And they just provided this extra substance to the worlds outside of their respective levels, and were just fun little nods to the movies that these worlds actually came from as well. And one final thing I would like to mention in regards to Kingdom Hearts 1 is the optional alternative cutscenes the game has depending on which actions you were to do or not to do within the game. Examples of this are if you clear Tarzan's world before Wonderland, you will see a cutscene of Snow White being captured instead of Alice. Additionally, if you were to clear Monstro after fighting Riku the second time in Hollow Bastion, certain Monstro scenes will change, such as before you fight a Parasite Cage for the first time, you actually won't team up with Riku, and at the end of the Monstro world, you will engage in an alternative scene where Riku asks Sora,
What? You don't remember your best friend?
Liar! You're not Riku!
since at this point in the plot it's revealed that Ansem Seeker of Darkness has taken over Riku's body. And to this day, fans are still finding these extra secrets when they play through the original Kingdom Hearts, when they do replay the game. And I just chalk that up to the fact just how fantastic Kingdom Hearts 1 actually is. And it's because of these feats I just feel that the original Kingdom Hearts 1 is underrated and still just has this unique spot over the rest of the franchise, and is still worth playing to this day, either for the first time or replaying, as there is just a lot to unpack in the game when compared to the rest of the franchise. Anyway, that's all for today's video, and if you've played Kingdom Hearts, I would just like to know what Kingdom Hearts game is your favourite, and is Kingdom Hearts 1 still worth replaying for you? I would love to hear what you think down in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you think Kingdom Hearts 1 is underrated, and I hope you continue to have a fantastic day. I'll see you around.